I I think we're ready to go.
I think we are. I mean, everyone has to give us a thumbs up on this beginning slide, right? I mean, the creativity of the slide. We knocked it out of the park, right, Terry?
I mean, we spent hours on this one. I mean, really
All
a
right.
crazy amount of time doing this.
Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to be here. Thank you, Agatha. We love working with Innovate US. Today is a really fun topic about communication, and I want to get it started with a question. So, we would love for this to be very interactive, so just jump into the chat. I've got the chat pulled up here so we'll be able to see. But I would like you to answer, how well do you understand what you do in government? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I don't understand it at all, and 5 being I completely understand it, how well do you understand the nuance, the policy, the jargon of what you do? All right, we have a lot of fours. We have a 5. We have some threes. I see that there's people who are fours. You're probably experts and you're probably just lifetime learners where you're thinking, I always have something to learn. Threes, fours, twos. Interesting, Terry. Yes?
Yeah, very interesting to see the people being honest that, oh, new to the role. I see there as a 3. Yeah, and Jamie Ponce, maybe it's Ponce,
Yep.
is new to the role, 3. So being new to government, definitely that is something to take into account.
Yeah. Okay. So now, but flip it and imagine someone who is, whether it's a constituent, so a citizen, or someone who's not in your role. How familiar do you think they are with what you do? How much do they understand it? So, 1 being not at all, 5 being they totally understand. Wow. Lots of ones, twos, 0, 1s. We're all the way on the
Minus
other end
five.
of the spectrum. Yeah.
There was a -5 that threw by.
Was
So
there a -5? Okay,
yeah.
right. So it's hard, right, to understand government. There's a divide between what you know as experts and what the people you are communicating to, what they understand about government. So today we actually want to give you 4 tools that are going to help you bridge this divide
Whoa,
between
whoa,
what
whoa, whoa.
you know and
We can't do this, Jamie. You can't start with the 4. We can't tell them that yet. We got
why
to
not?
we have to tell them the truth.
What is the truth?
We
Terry,
got to
tell us the
tell
truth.
them, we have to tell them that they're cursed.
Oh,
No,
goodness.
I know it's shocking for you to hear this, but you're all cursed. I know what you're thinking. You work in government, you serve the people, you're helping people make sure the roads are operating, taxes are paid, utilities get done. All of these things are happening in your areas, in your states, in your municipalities, even overseas that you're doing it. But believe it or not, you're cursed. Well, actually, we're all cursed. And to understand the curse, I need to take you here to the campus of Stanford University, where a graduate student named Elizabeth Newton discovered the curse. And so she did a social experiment where she gathered a group of people together, and we're going to call those people the tappers. The tappers were assigned to go out to groups of 100 people and tap out well-known songs. Mary Had a Little Lamb, This Land Is Your Land, Happy Birthday. And they had to predict what percent of people in those groups of 100 would pick the song just by them tapping on a tabletop. And so they all pretty much across the board picked 50%. 50% will get the song right. So off they went, armed with their pens and the melody and the words in their head, and they went and tapped away. And it wasn't 50%. It wasn't even 20%. It was less than 3% guessed the song correctly. And what Elizabeth Newton discovered is what we know as the curse of knowledge, that the tappers knew everything. They knew the song, the words in their head, but how they transferred that information prevented the audience from understanding it and from being able to talk about it and name it. And that's the same thing that happens to all of us. You are all experts in your field. Even the people who started new, you have an expertise right now. But how you transfer that information and the way you present it, whether it's written or spoken, can hurt you because it might not get retained or remembered because of the curse of knowledge. And here's another way to think about it. Think of this big blue circle as everything you know about the education policy you're implementing, or the transportation, the new procurement rules that you have to abide by, or anything you have to do with revenue sharing. In the public-private partnerships. That's the blue circle. And you decide to present on one of those topics, and that's the medium circle in purple. But here's the problem, is that because of the curse of knowledge, the small green circle is all that gets retained. And so we want to give you tools and techniques so that the medium circle and the small green circle align more, so that more of what you present on, more of what you write about gets retained, gets remembered, and is understood the way you want it to. So here's another way to look at it. So if you were in government and you were talking to a citizen and you said resource realignment occurred to optimize baseline funding streams pursuant to legislative mandates, they probably wouldn't know what you're talking about, right? They probably would have no idea. And so think about how you would present that to someone who had no idea about what some of these words meant, and to think about it in that way. And that's why we want to give you 4 tools and techniques to help you break that curse and to help you avoid that government talk trap, that so that people understand you and that people retain what you're talking about.
Thank you, Terry. You do such a good job explaining that curse of knowledge. And it's so true. We all have it no matter what program we're working on or what division or department or country that we're in. So the first tool we want to give you is the audience fluency funnel. Anytime before you are going into anything that requires communication, whether it's an email, whether it's creating a website, whether it's making some type of publication, or if you're in a meeting, a public meeting, an internal meeting, any type of a meeting, before you go in, I want you to imagine putting your audience through the fluency funnel. And to demonstrate this, we're going to pretend we have 2 different people. So we have Bernie and we have Gina, and they are both interested in education funding. All right, so we have 4 questions that we're going to ask about each of these people. How much public sector experience do they have? How much educational funding experience do they have? How much time do they spend thinking about educational funding? And how much familiarity do they have with all of the words or the jargon around educational funding? So Terry, how about you put Bernie through the audience fluency funnel?
Sure. So Bernie is a parent who lives in the state, and he wants to know more about how his schools in his area are funded. And so he sets up a meeting with you to hear more about it. And so to go through the funnel, does he have public sector experience? Not really, as a short amount. Does he have any educational funding experience? None. Does he spend time thinking about education funding? Probably a little, but not a lot. And then how familiar is he with the funding jargon? Probably not much at all, pretty minimal. So we would say he's a beginner in government fluency.
And Gina, on the other hand, let's say that she's maybe like a school superintendent or something like that. She's been in public sector for a long time, specifically in education. So you can ask the very same questions about Gina, and she has a long public experience. She has a lot of educational funding experience. Because funding is really important to her goals and objectives, she probably spends a lot of time thinking about educational funding, and she's very familiar with the words or the jargon around education funding. And you can translate this to whatever your program is or to whatever your specific application of this is. But we would say that Gina has an advanced government fluency. If you were to then go into a meeting on the same day with both of these folks, you would probably be able to say something like this to Gina. You could say, education funding operates through various fiscal allocation models, including both formula-based, WADA, and categorical appropriations to ensure resource distribution aligns with statutory mandates. And Gina's probably going to be okay with that. She's probably going to get it, and it's going to be fine.
But you got to adjust that when it comes to Bernie. So it might be something more like this. Education is funded through different mechanisms established by law. It involves giving school money based on average number of students in the school, formula based funding, and for special projects, which we call categorical funding. And if you start looking at these two, you can see the differences. You can see that jargon and that those words that are used in there. And so paying attention to who your audience is and what their level of expertise is or knowledge is can go such a long way into how you present information and whether it's going to resonate or not.
And Dennis, yeah, it does sound like it's written by AI, and this example actually is. And I would like to point out that AI is fantastic for simplifying into simplified language for anything that's written. It's really important to be able to carry that skill into a human to human communication. So if you're on video, if you're in an in-person call, on a virtual call, if you're presenting anywhere publicly, you've got to be able to take the skills that AI is really helping us get and translate that into human to human communication. And when we think about language and jargon, let's just look at some words that are just have to do with education funding. If you put these words on the screen, Terry, the ones I want to really bring up are the really simple ones. So over on the right, or I don't know if it's my right, you see words like procurement or solicitation, even words like grant or statute or title. These are words that unless someone is very familiar, they're going to cause questions and confusion. So solicitation, it has different meanings depending on where it's used. Solicitation is very different if you're talking about it in a bar versus talking about it when it comes to educational funding. So we have three really fast just tips for you if you're going into communication with different audiences. Number one, put them through the fluency funnel. And then we use is there not a presentation showing?
There is.
There is. Okay, it came in the chat. It says, is there supposed to be a presentation showing? Okay, so it's the 3 E's. The first one is eliminate. The safest bet, if you do not know who you are talking to, if you don't know who's going to be coming to your website, if you don't know who's coming to your event or you're speaking, eliminate all of the jargon. Just eliminate it and use simple language. If your intent is to educate your audience, then explain the jargon. And we recommend explaining it first. So if you're going to say something like what's a good example, Terry? My mind's going blank. Use,
For eliminate?
yeah, for eliminate. No, for explain.
Oh, for
If,
explain.
if
Oh,
you're going to do an
if you were
acronym,
just going to say what WADA was, think about if you talk about WADA, you have to explain. If you use that acronym in a sentence, you need to probably explain what that means, what that type of funding mechanism is. If you
and
don't,
you'd also want to say the words that it means before you say the acronym. So you'd want to say, let's say it's Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, instead of saying CDPHE, which is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, you want to do Colorado Public Health and Environment before you say CDPHE. If you use an acronym first, your audience is just going to check out right away. So do the explanation first. Number three, if you know that your audience is very familiar with your topic, then just go ahead and use it. Employ all of the jargon. But that's just really quick. Eliminate, explain, or employ, depending on the fluency funnel.
and so now we want to introduce to you the second tool, and we're going to use these guys. Now, this is a band, an English street band called The Y. And if you're living overseas right now, you probably shouldn't go searching in your local pubs for them, because if you look at their Instagram, they only existed for about 6 months. And my theory on it is that they spent all of their recording budget for hair care products because they look pretty good. So it's not The Y, the band, that we're talking about. It's the idea of why are you talking? Why are you talking? And you might be saying, oh, well, Terry, I have to talk to my leadership team or in an hour, or I have to go do a public town hall with citizens about a change in rules and environmental rules, or I have to talk to business leaders who want to get permitting sped up. And that's not why you're talking. Those are the occasions that you're talking. Why you're talking has to do with these, and these are takeaways. And that's our second tool, is we want you to know your takeaways, the fundamental pieces of information that you want your audience to take away from a conversation, from a meeting, from a newsletter, from a website. We want you to think about what are those foundational takeaways, and we want you to actually write them down before you start typing that email, before you go into that meeting, before you do that formal presentation and create a PowerPoint deck. We want you to write down your takeaways, because you have to pass a test. And the test is what we call the water cooler test. And so imagine that you gave a presentation to a group of people about education funding. And they met at the water cooler a day later, and someone showed up who wasn't at the meeting and said, "Hey, what was that education funding meeting about? What was that public meeting about?" And they might say, and their response might be, well, they talked about school funding. Well, there you would fail the water cooler test, because they're not repeating your takeaways. While if you have effective takeaways embedded in your presentation, then they might say, well, they said revenue is changing, schools are a priority, and funding is fair. And now suddenly your takeaways have resonated even a day later, a week later, and they're repeating them back. And the details within that are probably going to be there as well, because the person might say, "Oh, what is funding is fair?" And now suddenly that ignites someone and allows them to talk about it more specifically. So we want to pass the water cooler test. Now, here's the catch. You might say, "Oh, great, I'll have 8 or 10 takeaways for this meeting I have coming up." But actually, that hurts you, because you lose your narrative then, because there's been scientific studies that show that people only remember 4 things. So you want your takeaways to be 4 or less. If you have 5, 6, 10 takeaways, you are minimizing the chance that people are going to remember what you want them to. And thus, it creates more communication opportunities, miscommunication, failed projects, things like that start to happen. So you want to keep your takeaways to 4 or less as you're moving forward.
And we actually want to take a minute for you to practice this. So I want you to, we have a tool up here on the screen, and I'm going to put a link for it in the chat in a second so you can take it and use it back with your teams. But right now, if you just take a pen or something, think of something that you recently communicated, whether it was on a website, in an email, to a group, and think about what you communicated and what your takeaways were, and just write down what you think the takeaways were. We'll give it just, what do you think, Terry? 60 seconds
Yeah,
or so?
we're going to give you a minute or two to do this.
What were the takeaways that people would have taken from the last time you communicated, or a recent time?
And so think about, you'd be writing it down on the form.
Give it just a few more seconds here so you can think about it. So even if you haven't gotten to where you've actually written them all down, you probably at least started thinking about a recent time that you communicated and what the takeaway might have been. So this tool that we put in the chat, it's designed so that you can put your takeaway there, and then in the section, I can't see, it's not big enough for me to see what it said, but it says takeaway 1, right? And
Yeah,
then what we want you to do is actually take your takeaway and try to turn it into a heading. So a heading is when it's easier to remember, right? So Terry, can you read it, what it
Yeah,
says there
sure.
on
So
the screen?
funding is allocated. So imagine your takeaway was funding is allocated between schools based on a common formula that treats all schools the same. but we can turn that into a header or a headline that says funding is fair. And so now suddenly we have that headline that catches people attention, and then you can give all the details below it. You should still have that takeaway, but think of ways how to condense it to 4 or 5 words so that it's really able to be digested and retained and remembered and even repeatable, because that can be so important when it comes to taking away information and your main takeaways. But takeaways don't always happen with it doesn't apply just to spoken communication, right, Jamie?
Yeah, it also applies to anything that's written. So let's say we went to this website. This is a government website. And if I go there, I don't really know where to look first. So there's a lot of text heavy information here. And I'm sure the person putting this together had a lot of knowledge, right? And knows that everything is important in order for total understanding. But as a first person coming and looking at this website, and if I were to keep scrolling, there's more and more pages of this where it's just dense bullet description, bullet description, bullet description. I don't have any takeaways that I can just look at and say, okay, I know exactly what's happening with this website. I know exactly where to go. But now I'd like you to imagine that we applied the takeaway rule to this website. What would it look like? Instead of all of this text heavy information at the beginning, we transform it where now we just have 4 takeaways with arrows where I instantly know where I can go and what's happening on this website. So we have available funding sources, tools for finding funding, common rules, where to go to get more information. There's my takeaways. This works in spoken and this works in written.
So
And
now I want to see if you all pass the water cooler test. We want to do a self water cooler test. Now, think of your last communication opportunity, whether written or spoken. Do you think that your audience took away the takeaways that you wanted them to? And just put a yes or no in the chat.
just yes or no, do you think they had got some yeses, got some nos?
I appreciate people.
Really tempted to put somebody on the spot and say, why are you saying yes? But I won't. Don't worry.
I appreciate people who say no, because that's kind of taken maybe from Kathy. I appreciate that, Kathy. And so even that ambiguity, so having those takeaways beforehand and really always referring to them and making and reinforcing them and making sure that you're hitting them can go a long way to making sure your message and those takeaways resonate for sure.
So we're going to go on to our third tool because we don't have a lot of time here today. We could talk about this forever, but we're going to go on to the third tool. And to introduce this one, we're actually going to have former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson in a video. So take a look at this. Go ahead, Terry, and play the video.
Sorry. Here it is. Should be.
Is it coming?
There we go. Try one more time.
Let's try it again.
With safer streets.
There we go.
With great local schools, with fantastic broadband. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me.
Okay, so just put in the chat, what do you think went wrong here? Angela says she's sweating. Okay, what do you think went wrong? I mean, obviously he was kind of fumbling through his papers and things like that, but the most important thing, too many words, well, he didn't really seem to have, he's lost, right, Tamara? He's lost. He doesn't know what he wants to say, right? And that's the biggest thing. He just didn't know what he wanted to say. So Terry, you can go ahead and introduce the third tool, which is knowing how to organize.
Yeah, we want you to know your organization. We see organization as being one of the biggest tools to breaking that curse and to breaking that government, letting people know what you're about to talk about. And so I want to give you an example. We have this here, and this is this is a map, and in the map that's mapped out a road trip. And so imagine if I took you and threw you in the car and just took you on this road trip, but I didn't say anything about it. You'd be wondering, one, why is this man kidnapping me? But two is, where am I going? Am I going for 3 minutes, 3 days, 3 weeks? How long? And so I need to give you what I would call a roadmap. And the roadmap is, oh, we're going to start up at Grand Teton National Park. We're going to work our way down to Arches, go through Meteor Crater, and we're going to end up in Phoenix sipping cocktails by the pool in 110-degree heat. Well, now you know where we're going. You might be really interested in Meteor Crater, or you might be interested in Arches, and suddenly you are an active listener and you're an active participant because I've given you a roadmap.
And I actually want to show this. We're going to show an example here of a roadmap in action. And there's two things that this speaker does really well. And then there's one that we would kind of need to work on. But I want you to watch it and you'll find two things that she does really well.
So let's now explore how things happen in the budget. Here, I'm going to talk about the key players, the state budget process timeline, and opportunities for public involvement. The key players in the state budget process are...
Okay, so what do you think the two things are that she did phenomenally well? Number one, she had a roadmap, right? She told us exactly where she was going. Number two, it was really short and it was really easy to digest. The thing that we would want to coach her on is her delivery. She's a little bit monotone, a little bit hard to listen to, but she did a fantastic job on her roadmap. The rules of road mapping are actually really, really simple. So number one, you've got to do the roadmap early, do it right away, and make it in one sentence. It's got to be short enough to get into one sentence.
So here it is in action. If you see the three topics that she had, and she just put it into this type of one sentence roadmap, which made it really clear what she was going to cover. And so if you have a good roadmap, you also need these. And these are signposts. And think of signposts as an on-ramp and off-ramp within your presentation, telling people when you are done with one content area and that you're moving on to the next. And yes, I know you're surprised by this, but we have some rules for signposts. And the first rule is, every time you transition from one content area to another, you need to let your audience know. And you're like, well, how do I let them know? Good question. We want to give you our cap, pause, and announce system. And that is, you cap off one content area, you take a deliberate pause, and you announce the next content area. So let's use the California state budget process as an example. So we know her roadmap. And now if I was going from the first content area to the second, it might look something like this. So those are the key players. Now, let's talk about the timeline. Being that deliberate about it helps re-engage your audience and also keep them engaged so that they are following what you're saying. Even if you're going through dense information about processes, procedures, rules, regulations, doing this helps people stay active listeners. Now, I have a third rule, which is probably one of the most important ones, which is that it needs to be the same or very similar language as your roadmap. And so it needs to be almost exactly. So for example, I might say, so those are the key players. Now, let's talk about looking at our calendars and seeing where we have different deadlines along the way. Now that's the timeline, but I use completely different language. And you're wondering as an audience member, is that the numbers, the second content area, or is he's putting in a different content area? Is there a sub content area? And I'm 30 seconds or a minute down the road. And thus I've lost you. And that's the last thing I want as someone running a meeting or formally presenting. You want to make sure that people are lockstep with you, and using the same language as your roadmap in your signposts can help a lot.
And because this is really, really important, I'm actually going to put another tool into the chat here. So here's another link. This is our roadmap signpost tool. And there's a part 1 at the top where it's a place for you to list your major content areas. And then the part 2 in the middle, it has you take those content areas and actually put them into a 1-sentence roadmap. And then in part 3, you can turn that roadmap into your signpost to break up your presentation. And again, this is completely transferable to written or spoken communication. And Terry, I think we are at our 4th tool, so we are going to be able to have time for questions, which is fantastic.
Yes, we are. And one thing I want to point out is that this same system can be used in extemporaneous speaking, in question and answer. You can easily say things like, oh, that's a good question. I have 3 things I want to talk about. First, this. Second, this. Then you talk about those. I mean, you can do that. One, it does 2 things. One, if I come up to Kathy Jones and I say, hey, Kathy, I need to tell you 2 things, and I only tell you 1 thing and I start walking away, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What happened to the second thing? You're actively listening to me. So in a question and answer situation, if you say, I want to say 2 things, I want to give 2 comments on that question. First, and then you give your comment. Second, people are going to be listening for both of those things. And the second value it brings to you is it allows you to catch up and kind of give you a couple seconds to gather your thoughts. And you might say, well, what if I don't know if I have 2 or 3 things? Then just say there's a few things I'd like to mention. And then you can start numbering them. That's the way to do that. And that's another way of using this roadmap and signpost system to be an effective communicator and to break that curse and to get people listening to you in an active way, speaking extemporaneously. So now we're going to go on to our 4th tool, and I'm going to do this. We're going to do a little quiz here, and we're going to show you 2 video clips. This is from the Great American Outdoors Act debate in the U.S. Congress, and I'm going to show you 2 clips, and I want to know, after you listen to both, which one is more persuasive? Which one is it that you are more persuaded by based on these 2 clips? So the first clip is from former Congressman Gianfort from Montana, and it goes pretty quickly, so get ready for it.
Unfortunately, too many of our parks have fallen into disrepair. This bill begins to rebuild and repair our parks.
Okay, so that's the first one. Now the second one is from Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee. Here it is.
Here's what we're talking about. We're talking about leaky roofs. We're talking about access roads with potholes. We're talking about trails that are worn out so you slip and fall down when you go to hike. We're talking about sewage systems that are broken, shutting down whole campgrounds like the Chilhowie Mountain Campground at the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, which is shut for 2 years. 500 families usually use it every summer and can't go.
So which one is it that you were more persuaded by? 1 or 2? And Jamie, you'll have to tell me because I don't have the chat. I can't see the.
It's like vast majority is saying 2.
2. Right. 2 probably. And so I want to know from your perspective why. Go ahead and put in the chat why you thought.
Tangible examples, more visual language, specifics. There is one person who said they liked 1 because it was short and sweet.
Yeah. And definitely there's something to be said for being concise and to the point. But when
connecting it to people's actual lives, I think that's great. Yeah, it makes it real. And that's actually our final tool is know how to make what you're saying real. Make communication real. And go ahead, Terry, you want to talk about the first?
Sure. So the first way, so think of making it real on a spectrum. On one side of the spectrum is a really simple way to do it and to make things descriptive and real for people and tangible by what we would say lists. And so thinking about those lists. And so, for example, this one is our parks are falling into disrepair, which is what the congressman talked about. And yes, it's a true statement. It's short, it's sweet, but all he would have to do to make it more real, because that's an abstract statement. I don't know how bad it is. Is it just that there's a pothole in a couple places? Do we really need to give $100 billion to this? Or is it bigger? But now, if I put in a list like our parks are falling into disrepair because, like leaky roofs, trails that are worn out, roads with potholes, broken sewer systems. Now, suddenly, you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it, you can taste it, even like you can smell it. All of those things start to become, and it becomes more real in that way.
There's, not to interrupt you, Terry, but I
Go
think
ahead.
it's so applicable to government, because if you say something like, oh, we are prioritizing AI adoption in our agency, it'd be like, we are prioritizing AI adoption by education for our employees, by piloting AI solutions, making it real and showing the examples of how that works.
Yeah.
Or
Putting it
accessibility. We're prioritizing accessibility by testing all of our websites with screen readers. We're making it very specific.
And so we want to show you an example from a government meeting and see how they just added a couple descriptive examples to make something real.
The way that we break down the county is using a transect, and we go from T1 open space, which would be undeveloped space like Bells Bend or Beeman Park, all the way to T6, which is downtown, so the most developed part of our city.
So right there, she could have just said, we're going to go from T1 open space to T6 downtown and left it at that. But instead, she added in those quick examples, Bells Bend, Beeman Park, so that people could picture who were in that area and in this meeting, oh yeah, those are open spaces, those are not. And then going all the way to downtown, our most developed area. And people start imagining the buildings, the streets, the restaurants, all of that downtown. So it's really important. And you see how effective that is to make it more real rather than just an abstract concept of zoning.
We'll do one more quick example on this one. Oh yeah, with lists, it's very easy. You just say it's like this, and it's like this, and it's like this. We want to do one more quick example because I know we're getting to time here. On this one, I want you to really pay attention to what this gentleman is saying. So his slide is a little bit distracting because it's very text heavy, but he's doing a great job with his words. So listen to what he's saying.
There are also arbitrary distinctions on what kinds of businesses can be in each district. And many of these districts are located in similar places, even across the street. So you might find, walking along a street, that the left side allows movie theaters, but on the right side, they're not allowed. Or you might want to open up a bike sale shop, and you can do that today on either side of the street. But if you also want to rent or repair your bicycles, you might have to relocate across the street just to expand your business in the way you want.
So if he had just said, he just started out with, there are arbitrary distinctions regarding where businesses can be located. That's 100% true, but it's totally abstract. Instead, he said, there's two bike shops across the street from the other. The one on the left side can sell bikes, but zoning prevents them from renting bikes. And the bike store on the right, however, can both sell and rent bikes. And that's how arbitrary our zoning is. He just made it very, very real by giving these examples. And I'd love for you, as your homework, to take the takeaways that you started writing down and figure out how to add lists or examples to make those no longer abstract, but to make them very real for your audience.
And that's 4 tools to help you break the curse and also to avoid that government talk trap. Think about knowing your audience, using that audience fluency funnel, putting people through it. There was a good question that came up in the chat. What if you have a mixed audience? And you want to kind of go to your common denominator, but still throw in expertise language at times so that people who are experts are feeling like, oh, you're talking to me as well. So you have to balance that, but you don't want to alienate people who have no knowledge at all. So you have to apply to them, but you also need to address some terms, some examples that will give people who are experts in that field or knowledgeable to make sure that they feel like, oh, this is valuable to me as well. And we can talk about that more in the Q&A session. The second one is know your takeaways. Write down those takeaways. They should be 4 or less. Don't have more than that. And really make sure that you use those as a guide as you're putting together either written communication or spoken communication. And then the third is know how to organize. That roadmap and signpost system, you can use it in a formal presentation, you can use it in written communication, and you can use it in extemporaneous speaking. And then finally, know how to make it real. Think about that spectrum. Simple lists, or an example or a story or a hypothetical that brings that policy, that brings that process, that brings that procedure to life and really helps people understand what you're talking about. That is a secret sauce to breaking the curse, is by making things real and tangible. So it's not just abstract policy and rules and procedures, that it's real.